Welcome in to the PFF NFL show. Hello to those of you watching on YouTube as well. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson. What's the official word on Mike Renner? He is
on secret assignment to the Yukon for the next while. Indeterminate length of time.
Secret assignment for Mike Renner. We've kicked him off the pod for at least a short period of time. So it's going to be Sam and I trying to carry things in Mike's absence right now.
We're not in the Nook anymore.
We're not in the Nook. We've come out of the Nook. Again, if you guys are watching on YouTube, you see us. We're kind of on the set. I had to do my hair up this time.
I have to sit up. I can't slouch. I have to actually relatively sit back and posture.
No, it's little Sam and little laptop versus big Steve.
The last
Big
week in our lives has been a tough week for my posture. I've had to sit up straight for an extended period of time, both on set,
we're at Sports Illustrated, yeah,
and now podcasting. That used to be our one refuge, just being able to slouch in the corner.
Quit complaining. This is your new life, Sam. We're going to be talking about football on camera or through the podcast nonstop. All right, it's free agency time, Sam. It's finally here. It is time to go. We've been going back and forth between, diving into free agency. We created the free agent guide that's over a part of PFF Edge and Elite that you guys need to just pick up so you guys know what's going on here in this next week as we head into free agency. But now it's we're going to put the draft aside for a couple minutes to focus on free agency right now. So I think we have to start with the quarterbacks, right? Figure out what is going to happen here with the carousel.
Well, we have to start up top, and it's not the Kirk Cousins chaos, which I've now just nicknamed it in a nice little run of
Cousins chaos.
Nice little run of alliteration.
Yep.
It's Drew Brees. Everybody just assumed for the last couple of months that, Drew Brees will technically be a free agent when that contract voids, but they're going to get it done, and that's not really what's happening.
I assumed that.
Yeah, so we all did. But we're now, a couple of days away from Drew Brees being an active participant in free agency and being able to talk to other teams.
I don't even know if I can wrap my head around that. I still have to assume he's going to go back to the Saints.
Yeah.
He'll go back to the Saints. It's the best place for him. Play in the dome. They finally put the pieces around him. Why would you want to go start over?
Well, you're the wrong person to ask about this because you don't seem to think that the money is an important part. But at this point, why would you not wait till free agency and see what the offers are?
Because I would think at this point in your career, look, I understand millions of dollars.
Yes.
It's important to everyone, no matter how many millions you already have.
Many, many millions.
Many, many millions. But I would think at this point in Brees' career, with one Super Bowl win, very close in the playoffs last year, they finally have this nice supporting cast around him. Alvin Kamara saves his career just by throwing screens to him.
Save his career.
Didn't save his, but I'm saying in the future. He's got 5 more years just because of Kamara and his work on screen.
I'm just saying, right now, the Saints have $28.5 million in cap space-ish, right?
Yeah.
The Browns almost have $100 million additional dollars to spend.
You're going to go to Cleveland, play in the cold, and start to rebuild this team as you get to your 40-year-old
So
season?
let's say Drew Brees is listening to offers. If you're the Browns, so first and foremost, the Browns have the most cap space in the league by $24 million-ish. If you're the Browns, you would have to try and go after Drew Brees, right? If he hits the open market. Let's just establish that as a given.
That would be the smart move. Yeah.
Okay. If you're Drew Brees and the Browns come after you with $113.8 million in cap space, you've got to be listening, right?
I'd ask for part ownership of the team. I mean, that there would be
the John Gruden move.
$40 million guaranteed. Yeah. I want Gruden plus.
I want my $100 million contract, and I want 2% of the franchise.
I think that's a fair offer. I don't even know why we're talking. I still don't think it happens. I'm still not buying into Drew Brees on the open market.
I don't think it happens either. I'm just saying that at this point, a couple of days out, why would you not give yourself the bargaining position of hearing the crazy offers? Because they're going to be nuts. Why wouldn't they be? You're talking about a Hall of Fame quarterback who is still playing at a Pro Bowl level, and there are teams out there that are starting terrible quarterbacks.
I get it. I understand. I get it. So if Brees hits the open market, are we talking about the Browns, the Jets, potentially breaking the bank? I don't think the Broncos can even compete.
Well, that's the interesting thing is what this does to the market, because with one top-level quarterback out there and a bunch of guys below him, that guy can essentially write his own ticket and set the market. That's why I've thought all along the Kirk Cousins deal is going to be a $30 million a year plus thing. It's going to reset this quarterback market. But what if Kirk Cousins all of a sudden isn't even the number one quarterback option out there.
But is he still the hottest commodity? Because you're talking with Cousins, it's a 4 or 5 year deal. With Breeze, we're talking maybe 2 years. So is Cousins still technically the hottest commodity?
I mean, he's the most kind of sound long-term investment, but there's going to be a bunch of teams out there who, if you gave them the option, which one of these two guys do you want, are going to go after Drew Brees, even though they know it's a shorter-term deal. Any team that thinks they can contend in the next couple of years is going to prefer Drew Brees to Kirk Cousins. Right. So it has to depress his market value to some degree.
I get it. So I'm still not wrapping my head around Brees on the open market.
Okay.
If we get there, we'll run the emergency pod.
Okay.
Right? And we'll just do a full update on all scenarios. Let's assume he doesn't get there. What's going to happen now with Cousins, Case Keenum, and then that next tier of Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Bradford?
If we were right and Drew Brees is in fact off the market and not really a part of free agency, then it is Kirk Cousins as the clear number one quarterback to pretty much everybody, and his contract is going to reset the market, break the bank. I have some Twitter bet with some guy that I don't even remember who it is anymore, so it's probably not a big deal.
Show yourself better.
I've said that my money is on Kirk Cousins getting a deal that averages over $30 million a season, which is monstrous and way more than he deserves in terms of where he fits on the quarterback pecking order, because he's a top 10, top 15 QB?
I think he's top 10 at best.
Yeah, so he's not top 5, top 3 ever.
We're talking about a year removed. Let's go through the PFF grades real quick as I look at the player grades. 82.4 overall grade in 2015. 85.4 in 2016, which was a top 10 grade. That was his best season of his career. Last year, 78.8. That was 19th in the NFL. Now, I've been a big proponent of focusing on Cousins in his supporting cast, and I do think those 15 and 16 seasons, great supporting cast, one of the best receiving cores in the league.
And Sean McVay season.
And Sean McVay. Also, in our quarterback charting numbers, we're just finishing up our advanced charting for 2017, Cousins has had the highest percentage of open throws of any quarterback in the NFL over the last 2 years. And that includes last year in his 78.8 grade. So his supporting cast wasn't as good last year. The offensive line was a revolving door of terrible. But man, for a guy that's so dependent on everybody around him, including the play caller, this is risky.
Well, even just when I ran some numbers looking at the potential Vikings quarterback options, essentially if you look at the 3 guys they have hitting free agency and Kirk Cousins, they all grade about the same in terms of their ceiling seasons. Now they all have slightly different situations in terms of, you got Bradford, who at this point is just perpetually broken and you can't trust that he is going to be intact for any extended period of time.
How many good knees are available between Sam Bradford and Teddy Bridgewater?
At least one.
So that's a concern.
Yeah. So you've got, Bradford's extensive injury history. Bridgewater's injury history, which is one thing, but it was catastrophic.
Right.
And then Case Keenum's season, which is one season out of the blue on a very good team. So, but the peak seasons of Keenum, of Bradford, Bridgewater, and Cousins are all really close together in terms of PFF grading. They're all somewhere in that 85 range. And actually, I think Bradford has the highest of the group, but maybe the most question marks in terms of injury. But my point is, all of those guys under Cousins should get relatively modest free agent deals. Cousins is the guy who's potentially going to reset this market and break the bank. I still don't see the logic for the Vikings going after a guy that is a small percentage upgrade at best over their other options, but it's going to cost a monstrous amount of additional money. And for other teams, that just highlights the risk we're talking about. You're talking about grabbing a guy who is potentially a mid-tier quarterback and paying him like the best quarterback in the league.
Is there any team that you think it makes sense to break the bank for Kirk Cousins? Because you're talking about the Vikings, who in theory are closer than these other teams. They've got the receivers, they're building that offensive line, they've got a good defense, and they were so close last year.
I think there's 2 teams that it makes a modicum of sense for, and 1 team that it makes a huge amount of sense for. The Browns that we talked about before, they have the most cap space in the league. Even though they pick 1 and 4, it's still a risk. Trying to find a franchise quarterback ever, even with the top picks in the draft, is a gamble. And otherwise, you can mitigate that by taking a guy who you know is at least a top half quarterback. And you can win with a guy like that. So the Browns are moving in the right direction. They have the money to do it. They could decide that, you know what, we're going to play it safe and at least move this franchise incrementally in the right direction, rather than we'll take the shot on the quarterback that could make us a contender, but equally could move us backwards again. So they may do it. The team that I think just makes too much sense is the Jets. They have the second most cap space in the entire league, a desperate need at quarterback. Josh McCown was their starter last year. Actually played pretty well, but is old and I think a free agent himself now. Right. The two guys behind him, Bryce Petty, looked pretty terrible when he played.
And
Christian Hackenberg, who was so bad he couldn't even take snaps from Bryce Petty. So, yeah, the Jets need a quarterback. Kirk Cousins is the best one available, and they have the money to make him silly money offers.
So the whole deal with this Cousins thing is $30 million guaranteed, taking up a huge chunk of the salary cap. We're already seeing teams like Seattle having to unload the Richard Shermans of the world and unload some of their talent because Russell Wilson's taken up a big chunk of the salary cap. People are already talking about, hey, the Eagles have this beautiful window with Carson Wentz, and it's going to run out 2 or 3 years down the road because he's going to have to get paid. I mean, if you're the Browns, why do you really want to jump into that with a Kirk Cousins when there are quarterbacks that certainly have top 10 to top 15 potential in this draft for a fraction of the price? Would you want it? And the Jets, too, they're sitting there at 6. They'll have an option. They'll have an opportunity to get one of these quarterbacks. I don't know if I'd ever spend this type of money for Kirk Cousins, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, for the Browns, I think there's a good case that you don't need to do it because you got 1 and 4. There's no scenario by which you can't choose the best quarterback coming out. If you believe that one of those guys is a franchise quarterback, you can take that guy. The Jets are at 6. That's a different story entirely because conceivably the top 3 guys could be gone by the time you pick. Right. You might be left with a guy that you don't think has any shot of being a franchise quarterback, and you didn't make the move for Cousins, and suddenly you're back to square one where you either pick a guy that you don't think has any shot of being a franchise quarterback, or you're stuck again just treading water for a year, starting somebody like Josh McCown again and trying to take the whole deal. I think the Jets, there's a good case that you can. What's interesting is, so the base salary cap now is $177 million. So you're talking about spending, like 17% of your cap on one guy when you've got to get, 53 people under contract under that figure. So it is a big chunk of change, but the cap is moving consistently upwards year on year. It is getting an easier amount of money to manage, and it is the single most important position on the roster to do it. It does make some sense. It just looks crazy when you see, Kirk Cousins, the number 1 paid guy in the league.
That is one way of putting it. I mean, other than Flacco's performance going terribly over the last few years, his contract went from looking ridiculous to now being like a mid-tier.
Yeah.
It's still top, but mid-tier type of option now. So that would be the counter to it. Okay, what about the other guys? Case Keenum, is he just a one-year wonder? Is he just a product of having who we called the best wide receiver tandem in the league with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs? Does Sam Bradford have a market? Does Teddy Bridgewater have a market? Where do you see some of these other guys lining up? And is it alarming that the Vikings did not franchise Case Keenum? And is that the full indicator that they're all in on Cousins? Whether you believe it or not.
I don't know that it's alarming. It's not what I would have done. I think the smart play for them would have been to franchise Keenum. Don't take the risk signing him long-term. Give him the 1-year deal, albeit at a high figure, and see if you can back it up again. And at that point, you can still try and get a guy like Bridgewater back and even have an open competition with those two guys heading into the season, and you're not tied. You just have an extremely expensive backup if that was the way it worked out. I think the league generally is trying to ask itself, was Case Keenum this year just a 1-year thing? I don't think they know. Mike Zimmer made those comments during the Combine. I think they're perfectly fair. We don't know if Case Keenum is actually this good or if he was just on this good a team and it helped raise his level. So I think the league generally is going to be very leery about handing Case Keenum a big deal, but he's probably like the next best option out there because the other quarterbacks all have so many big questions about them. Sam Bradford, though, is interesting because a team like Jacksonville, say, or even Denver could potentially go after Bradford sign him to a relatively short-term deal, and he could be an extremely good quarterback for a couple of teams. But you know that at some point he's going to get injured, and you're going to have to skate through some games with somebody else at quarterback. Those guys have players on their roster they might turn things over to for a few games and be okay, but you don't want them starting all season.
I mean, so if you're in Denver's position, I would not be against Denver at 5 drafting their favorite quarterback. You know, you can get one of our favorites, either Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, my favorites at least, Josh Rosen, and still maybe get Sam Bradford and just see what you can get out of them. We kind of roll the dice there. In Jacksonville's case, they've already locked up Blake Bortles, so it's a little bit different for them to maybe bring in a Sam Bradford, but is it that crazy to say, let's roll the dice, Bradford has a shot to be better than Bortles, then we end up paying a lot of money for a potential backup, but you're bringing in competition. It's not that crazy, but I wouldn't expect Jacksonville at this point seems like they're married to Bortles unless they're really thinking outside the box.
Yeah. What is with that, by the way?
I really think you get suckered in. You get suckered into. You went to the AFC Championship. They were able to take Bortles from a gunslinger to a bit more of a game manager with this run-heavy attack, and it feels like the coaches like him and his teammates like him, and they feel like they've been able to manage him enough to get more out of him.
Sort of, but so he was good for a little stretch, and then passable for another stretch. But the whole bending the offense around him thing, like they were able to make him semi-viable by making that offense about as Mickey Mouse as humanly possible. Like to the only way you salvage Blake Bortles was by making the offense in such that pretty much any quarterback getting paid money in the NFL could have operated it. At which point, why would you pay Blake Bortles big money to do that when you can get
I wouldn't necessarily make that move. I'm just trying to explain where they are.
Okay.
With Bortles down there. Bridgewater's the interesting case, too. I've always stuck to the point that if Minnesota did not lock him up to some sort of team-friendly deal, that was a bit of a warning sign that they're not very confident in his knee.
I don't have any idea what his market value is right now. Because, one, I think generally the overall prevailing opinion on him was always a little bit harsher than PFF's opinion. I think he showed better in play-by-play grading than he did in conventional numbers or just from highlights and that kind of thing, because he was this very conservative street quarterback.
Definitely landed on the conservative end. The Alex Smith end where he didn't have a ton of big-time throws, didn't have a ton of turnover worthy.
So that's a big part of it. 2 is we haven't seen him in a modern NFL offense. But before he went down, he was trapped in Norv Turner's offense, which was 7-step drops. It was 2 receivers out in passing patterns. And if those 2 guys weren't getting open, and this predates the quality receivers that the Vikings have at the moment, if those guys weren't getting open, there was nowhere to go with the ball. The offensive line was terrible, and it was being put in tough situations in terms of long times to release, long step drops that they had to protect for. The whole thing was almost designed to make everything within that offense have a harder time than it needed to. And, you think you'll give him all these deep passes to play with, and that'll create the big plays. What it was actually doing was giving him nowhere to go with the ball, no time in which to do it, and causing him to check down every single time he dropped back, which made him look bad.
Highest percentage of 7-step drops 2 years ago, but one of the lowest average depths of target.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive because you think if all you're running is 7-step drops, you're going to be airing it out deep. Right. But what was happening is you would drop 7 steps, look up, the offensive line has already been killed, and you just have to get rid of the ball to the running back.
Or throwing it away. He led the league in throwaways
that too.
A couple of years ago
so
as well.
My point there is that I don't think we've seen the ceiling of Teddy Bridgewater. I think there's a better player in there than we saw produced by that offense. But you're dealing with the X factor of what is his knee now, because far less severe knee injuries have completely ruined quarterbacks' careers. I mean, Dante Culpepper had a much more minor injury than that. Minor in, air quotes, and that it was still pretty catastrophic. But they weren't talking about amputating Culpepper's leg when he went down.
Right.
But that he was never the same guy after that knee injury. And the same thing has happened to other quarterbacks. So, I mean, Bridgewater could come back. He could be the same guy that he's been before, or he could be a complete wreck. And we don't have any idea right now.
A fascinating potential scenario for him?
Mm-hmm.
What if New England swooped in and said, all right, you're the next.
Oh, you are Tom Brady's
You're the
heir apparent.
Now, it could be 5 years from now.
Wow.
Right? And there were a lot of analysts who compared Bridgewater to Brady coming out just from, a processing standpoint, short area accuracy type of standpoint. If the market is so dry, I wonder if New England even has a good evaluation on him pre-knee injury, but I think that'd be an interesting
That would be a
move.
phenomenal move. That actually would be genius when you consider what they've got to play with. My overall point with all of that, though, is I have no idea what that is worth.
Right.
Because QBs, if they have any shot of being franchise quarterbacks, tend to be $15 million plus a season. But there's so many.
Can you get him for 3 to 5? Can you get him for 3 to 5 million?
I don't know.
And you brought up Sam Bradford in Jacksonville. I mean, I think Bridgewater's in that boat. Or if you're Arizona and you're hoping to get somebody in the draft, and it's just bring in Bridgewater too, just in case. If you can get it for $3 to $5 million, that's nothing.
But Case Keenum, I think, got $3 million a year to be a guaranteed backup for the Vikings this past season. So that wasn't even a particularly rich backup quarterback contract, $3 million. And then he ends up starting and leading them to the NFC Championship game, and now we're going to be talking, 5-7 times that amount per year. But $3 million is average backup quarterback money. It's not like I think he's well ahead of that. I mean, I'm wondering. I honestly don't know where he fits. Whether he's $7 million a year, is he $10 million a year, 15? I don't know what his agent is going to be pitching. You know what I mean? And I think that could be as much a reason as anything why the Vikings haven't done this deal long term. Because if they're just on a completely different page from whatever they're trying to secure him as the next contract, that could be it, as much as they don't trust his knee.
But they also know more about his knee than anyone else.
Sure.
So the quarterbacks, the whole offseason we were talking about all the potential movement. Alex Smith's already moved. He's already in Washington. Kansas City's already locked into Patrick Mahomes, but still a lot more dominoes.
So we have an ideal fit for Kirk Cousins being the Jets. We have your genius move, actually, of Teddy Bridgewater to be Tom Brady's heir apparent. What's the best scenario for the best fit for Case Keenum and Sam Bradford?
Case Keenum, I would say, is Minnesota. There's something about a guy that's a journeyman. And look, I understand that he played for Jeff Fisher, who the more we hear stories about Jeff Fisher, essentially driving guys into retirement. I mean, Nick Foles on the verge of retirement.
LaMarcus Joyner almost
LaMarcus
quit.
Joyner. So I don't know. We almost have to make this adjustment for their performance there. But Keenum also played in Houston. He's been in other places where he just wasn't great.
Yeah.
So having 1 year and a familiarity with the system, I mean, is it just Minnesota or is it the Giants? Because, playing under Shermer, who he knows. I don't know that there's a great fit because I don't know that I trust Keenum outside of this 1 year that we saw him.
And this is why it made too much sense to me to franchise him. You keep him there for a year. You don't trust him long term, but you see if you can back it up again. And if it turns out he's actually that good, then you can re-sign him to a big deal. Why would you do that now? What do you think if Kirk Cousins is going to average $30 million a season, where does Keenum fall?
I think somebody falls in love and gives him 15.
See, that's not much. I mean, that's the sort of Tyrod Taylor curse money where you're that's a lot to be paying a guy that I'm not happy with, but it
can't be more than that though, right?
Really? I mean, didn't he play better than Tyrod Taylor last year?
Oh yeah.
That's the kind of isn't that worth more than that then? $20 million a year.
Okay,
like
so
$20
somebody
million
falls in love and pays 20?
Maybe.
But who is that? The only it's the Cardinals, it's the Jets if they don't get Cousins, or it's the Browns. I just don't know if I see that. Do we throw A.J. McCarron into this mix? Is he truly going to be a Brown?
Yeah, A.J. McCarron, free agent now with his grievance.
I would say this. I've been on. I've been all over the place, Sam. Banging the table for do not draft Saquon Barkley at 1.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the worst case scenario for the Browns is getting A.J. McCarron.
This is beautiful.
Drafting Saquon Barkley, and maybe even drafting Quentin Nelson, who we love, at number 4.
No, let's sketch it all out, right? Absolute worst case scenario for the Browns. This is a great segment. you spend
that's
big
what Browns
money.
Fans need to hear
Big money on A.J. McCarron, right? We're not even just signing him. We're giving him franchise quarterback money.
They're about to trade for Jarvis Landry, by the way.
Nice.
As we record.
Then we're drafting Saquon number 1. You're drafting Quentin Nelson, a guard, at number 4. And he's not playing tackle here. We're playing him a guard. Then what do they do at 33? We've got one more pick to screw up for them.
Get another guard. Even though
No, they're not going to go in. They're going to give them some credit, Steve.
Then they go quarterback.
Oh,
then
the second round, the dreaded second round quarterback that never works out.
So I wouldn't say Lamar is their worst because that would be a pretty good pick. But they would go somewhere else outside of quarterback. I would assume. And I'm trying to say that I love Barkley and I love Nelson as players, but the whole positional value thing wouldn't take them at 1 and 4. But that's a potential scenario for the Browns.
That would be rough.
That I wouldn't.
So
love.
The AJ McCarron thing, I think there is a pretty good chance that he goes to Cleveland. He's going to be their quarterback. The talk, they almost got the trade done before they somehow conspired to mess it up in when they were filing the paperwork. Hugh Jackson apparently loves AJ McCarron. It all sounds like it's going to get done the soonest opportunity those two have to get a deal on the table. The question is, it has to be in addition to drafting a quarterback, right? You can't possibly turn down every available quarterback in this draft twice, at number 1 and 4, essentially, to be convinced A.J. McCarron is your franchise quarterback.
If it's a Mike Glennon deal.
Yeah.
And I had no problem with the Mike Glennon deal last year. On the surface, it looks like a lot of money, but it's one you can get out of. He's a bridge guy. You're going to draft somebody. If it's a Mike Glennon deal and you just want to get McCarron in and see what you got, I'm okay with that because it's still part of that strategy of if you don't have a quarterback, try everything. As much as we joke about McCarron, I don't think he's great, but there's a chance. I mean, there's still a chance he could turn out to be a good player.
Which was the same with the Mike Glennon thing. You pay that guy essentially $15 million a season for as long as he justifies paying him $15 million a season. And if that's 1 year, that's 1 year.
So if that's the move and they get Baker Mayfield, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm okay with that.
I really hope, for the sake of Cleveland Browns fans, that they don't think that A.J. McCarron alone has solved the problem.
Right. I think that would be a potential issue.
That would be horrible.
All right, let's go to some other positions because it's not just quarterbacks. Just going through the potential big-name free agents from Malcolm Butler at cornerback, Allen Robinson, not going back to Jacksonville by all accounts unless they could work something out very quickly. Allen Robinson going to be out there on the market, a guy whose high-end seasons was just incredible. His high-end season was really incredible, but battling injuries. I mean, where does Robinson land? What do you think his market looks like?
Well, Robinson, I think he's interesting. I'm not 100% surprised that the Giants decided to move on. One, they did pretty well this year when they were forced lower down to the depth chart at wide receiver. And two, we're now talking 2 seasons since we saw a good Allen Robinson.
But he was so good in
2015. But he was bad the next year, and then he tore his ACL after like 3 snaps or something this year. So it's a long time since we've seen the best of Allen Robinson. The thing that really works in his favor at the moment, though, is that this is such a crappy year for wide receivers on the free agent market. He is by far and away the number 1 guy. Jarvis Landry was potentially the only other decent guy, and even he is a very different type of receiver, and he got tagged, and he's a trade candidate now. But Robinson is really the only guy in that list that you think has number 1 wide receiver potential. The guy that can come in and be your star receiver. Other than that, it's guys like Sammy Watkins, who at this point we're pretty sure does not have that capability.
He's still young. Watkins still young.
Yeah.
But I think we've seen Robinson truly be that number 1. Watkins high end, we've seen him as a good deep threat. We've seen Allen Robinson do it all over the field.
Here's a question for Allen Robinson, though. His shtick, both throughout college and the NFL, is I am so good that I can make terrible quarterbacks look great. You just put the ball in the air and I'll go get it.
Hackenberg, Bortles.
Exactly. Does he suddenly just break down if you go and give him a good quarterback who puts the ball where it should be? Does he just forget how to play? I don't know what to do with this perfect pass in my hands deep down the field. I'm going to need you to put it back here up in the air so that I can go win a jump ball and do something special.
Get him some Josh Allen in his life or some Lamar Jackson. Get him some inaccurate quarterbacks in his life.
There you go.
That's it. That's the package deal. You and I did a video a few weeks back saying Allen Robinson, Bears.
Yeah.
Could be this great fit. And
still makes a lot of sense.
Does make a lot of sense. Trubisky's a better quarterback, we think, than Hackenberg and some of those other guys. So maybe it won't really work, but that'd be the Bears are starting from scratch when it comes to playmakers, and that'd be a great place to start.
Trubisky still puts the ball in harm's way yet. There'll be plenty of passes for Robinson to fix.
Good. That's all we need.
Yeah.
What else we have here? Malcolm Butler, got a feel for his market and what he is. As he hits the open market, a guy that's played a ton of man coverage. I think he's got a pretty good feel for the game. fundamentally sound, but really, lost favor in New England.
Yeah, coming off an ugly season and obviously that train wreck of a Super Bowl where he was essentially sat down and only saw one snap of special teams. The cornerback market, I think, generally is pretty interesting because you've got Butler. You've got a few really fascinating names that are all. This is generally speaking, this is a terrible free agent crop. There are some good players in there.
We're gonna do a whole show on it, but it's a bad crop.
but it's bad. There isn't a huge amount of depth or star power across any of these positions. There aren't multiple top quality starters at almost any position that you're going to be happy with. So the cornerback group has some really interesting names, but each of them has warts. They have flaws. You've got Butler, who's coming off that terrible year and being benched in the Super Bowl. Tremaine Johnson, who has the size and length that NFL teams want right now. He's 6'2", 210 pounds.
Somebody will overpay for him.
Yeah, probably. And he may be better in a different scheme. You put him in that Seahawks kind of system where he gets to pretend to be Richard Sherman. I think you see a better player than we've seen. A guy like Rashawn Melvin, who played like an All-Pro for like half the season out of nowhere before getting injured and going down hurt. That's another pretty interesting name. Patrick Robinson, one of our stars of this season, who we were amazed at coming out of nowhere. If teams,
keys to the Eagles' Super Bowl run and everything.
If we assume that was being moved to the slot, he becomes the best slot option at cornerback and could potentially be a very good player. There's a lot of fun guys there.
What about Prince Amukamara, who just seems to sign one-year deals all over the place? 79, 79.5, 81.2, all solid PFF grades. He's just good.
That's what he is.
Just solid.
He is solid.
But that's a pretty good, if you don't want to break the bank for Tremaine Johnson, you're not going to break the bank for Malcolm Butler. Seems like Amukamara can be happy.
If you're a team that desperately needs to fix their number 2 corner problem, you've got one starter who you're happy with. You just can't find a second guy that can be anything other than a liability and a disaster. Amukamara is a perfect fit for that. He can come in, be your second corner, and be fine.
Did you write the overview in the free agent guide?
I don't even remember.
Amukamara is a solid player. It was the first line.
It's what he is.
There's no better way to describe Amukamara than solid.
The problem he has, though, is he's also oft injured, which doesn't help the desirability. But the other thing that's working against him is that he's a former first-round pick. And when you get a guy in the first round who it turns out is just sort of average, I think that always works against those guys.
Once feels like a bust, but he's always been.
Once people figure out that they're average, as opposed to linemen who, for some reason you can go for a long time before people work out.
Because you could just judge them by starts.
Yeah,
started 16 games.
So I think that works against him. But
you made the point that there's a lot of positions that just don't have any depth, and offensive tackle is one of those places. So
no depth.
The poor NFL that has an offensive tackle problem, right? An offensive line problem in general. And every single show I've done, every time I've had to do radio and a team needs a tackle, I'm like, there's Nate Solder.
The end.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And even Nate Solder, he's had his ups and downs, and he ultimately lands as a, solid NFL offensive tackle who's a better run blocker than he is pass blocker, which is scary. Again, you want a guy that can pass protect better. So Solder's a solid option. I don't know if New England's going to make a huge attempt to bring him back. There's some rumors about him maybe landing in Houston, reuniting with Bill O'Brien. But I don't know what else you do at the tackle position if you don't get Solder.
Yeah, nothing. There's no other options there. You got the rest of the guys available. You've got Ty Nsekhe from Washington, who struggled extensively when he was thrust in as a starter.
Solid backup guy. Yeah.
Who else is a potential free? Chris Hubbard from Pittsburgh again.
Cameron Fleming from New England.
Yeah, you're talking about guys that came in as backups, did okay in spot duty, starting at right tackle. You basically have no shot at left tackle if you don't get Solder.
Any other guys? So at guard, it's not a flashy position. Andrew Norwell at guard has had 4 excellent years for Carolina.
I'm going to need to know what the beat writers say about him.
Oh man, that's such an inside joke our listeners don't understand, and I don't even want to make them go find out because that would give people
realize how petty we are.
Yeah, too many listens. So we're not even going to get into the Andrew Norwell.
Okay. Andrew Norwell, though, all-pro caliber guard.
All-pro, PFF all-pro.
Yeah, regardless of whether people have heard of him that much.
Yeah, people essentially trashed us for making him an all-pro because they hadn't heard much about him.
Yeah. And
Okay.
because the Panthers beat writers weren't waxing lyrical about him on a weekly basis.
What about a couple former Giants offensive linemen, Justin Pugh, Weston Richburg, both guys coming off injury. Pugh's an interesting name because of some positional versatility. We're talking about how bad the tackle class is. He's been solid at right tackle, pretty good at guard as well. And then Richburg, maybe the best center in the class, but also coming off of injury as well. So the Giants have all these offensive line woes, and they've got two of the top graded offensive linemen on the free agent market.
Kind of strange now that you
Isn't it?
mention it. Pugh's one of these guys that's always flattered to deceive a little bit, I think. He always looks a lot, you think he's going to be a lot better over an extended period of time that he ends up grading. He'll have this run of a few really good games, look like a dominant player, and then it just seems to fall off and go by the wayside over the course of the year.
Right.
So initially I thought that this guy was, a reasonable right tackle, and then you kicked him inside to guard and he could be a really, really good guard. But it never actually quite happened. I think he might just be a guy that is solid/good at both spots, strangely.
Everybody just seems to be solid.
Yeah, he's fine at right tackle. He's fine at right guard, maybe a little bit better, but not going to be amazing at either spot.
All right, let's finish up here because we're running out of fodder when it comes to the free agent guys here. I think this is why there's been so many trades. The NFL has essentially looked at this free agent class and said,
oh, hell no.
No, we're going to have to be creative with some trades. We're going to have to focus on the draft. Any names that stick out at you for you that could be potential home run hits? Is it Eric Reed at safety, who's currently in the 30s or 40s in our free agent rankings? Is it Dante Moncrief? Could he have a breakout type of season? My boy Bradley McDougald. Bradley McDougald?
Yeah, you do like him.
At safety?
So,
is there a name? Just give me somebody that...
This is ridiculous in that we're talking Sam Bradford at tight end, but Tyler Eifert. Tyler Eifert is potentially one of the league's great mismatch weapons at tight end if you can keep him on the field. And that is seeming like a more and more ridiculous if as the years go by. But you sign him to a cheap, moderate deal. Somehow you catch lightning in a bottle and he doesn't break something over the next year or two. You have a mismatch weapon few teams can deal with.
The year that he was healthy, 2015, that's the season that I always reference. That was like Andy Dalton's peak statistical season where Eifert's on the field, A.J. Green, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, and that's a good group of playmakers that are elevating the quarterback. If he could stay healthy, man, he could stretch the field. He could do it all. I would love to see a nice, healthy season from him. I think he's worth the gamble.
Couple of other, Le'Veon Bell obviously is potentially going to hit the market.
Correct.
I think there's a half-decent chance that does happen, and then his contract becomes really interesting because he is basically as good as it gets and as complete a player as it gets. As much as a running back really can impact an offense, how much is that worth? That's the question the NFL is going to get posed.
And you're honestly going to, probably be guaranteed 2 really good years out of him, and then you have to worry about, does he decline or does he continue to stay at a high level?
I'm really interested to see if, for as much a one-year wonder as Case Keenum was, Jerick McKinnon in the same backfield is kind of the same thing. He'd always flashed the ability to make plays, but this season he was good across the board at everything, and we didn't really see that from him before. Can he do that? Was that
more opportunity-driven, or do you think it just kind of...
No, I think he was just better across the board at everything he did. He's going to hit free agency, I think. He wants to be a primary ball carrier in an offense. I'm curious to see if he can replicate that form on a bigger scale for somebody next year.
The one other name, I wouldn't spend a ton of money for him, but if you put him in the right, if you pair him with another running back that can do some of the pass game stuff, Carlos Hyde, one of my favorite nuggets from the draft guide, worst pass blocking, gave it the most hurries out of any running back in the NFL and had the most drops out of any running back in the NFL. So pass game grade was not good for Hyde last year, but he can run the ball pretty well.
I've got another one for you. This is a terrible edge rusher group. We assume that DeMarcus Lawrence is going to get tagged, though they haven't actually done it yet, I don't think.
Not officially official.
But he is the only real quality edge rusher available on the market, or was before they tag him. Junior Gillette, though, is under 30 years old, is coming off, well, not coming off, but had 2 back-to-back Achilles injuries, which tend to be like death for explosive pass rushers. That's the one thing that just destroys those guys. He came off 2 of them back-to-back and actually played really well last season. Only had 3 sacks, but had 9 hits, 25 QB hurries, all in under 410 snaps on defense. If you give him another year another year removed from those Achilles injuries, he may be the best pure edge rusher on this market, legitimately.
No, that's a high. We allowed to say now that Mike's gone?
No, my other Mike is going to beep it out for us.
Bleep that right out. That's another high potential rusher. If you can get him at the right price, that'd be great. I'm looking at the draft guide, though. I'm sorry, the free agent guide, Sam. Junior Gallette's pass rush productivity last year was just behind Barkevious Mingo.
What?
In this free agent
how
class.
many times did Barkevious Mingo rush the passer?
He had 21 pressures on 61, 131 snaps.
Yeah. No.
This is the breakout season for Mingo. He's
No,
a
it's
free
not.
agent. This is his year. I loved him coming out of college. I was wrong. Poor Mingo. This is the year. No, Gallette's really a good call, though, because he had a quietly very good season last year.
And
he's worth
in a
look.
class where there's just no quality pass rushing option, that could be a steal for a team that gets the right kind of deal.
Agreed. I think we've exhausted
The free agent group.
all of them.
Yeah.
If you guys want more information, you're going to go grab PFF Edge or PFF Elite. When you do that, you get our free agent guide, which is only a small fraction of what you get because you're going to get our draft guide, which is already out, version 1. You're going to get the QB annual. You're going to get player grades. And if you have Elite, well, we're probably going to throw a party for you. You get to do whatever you want if you're part of the Elite group. But you get premium stats,
Yes.
which is the greatest football product on the market. It's back. Premium stats, all part of PFF Elite. So go ahead and check it out.
Back and being upgraded over the course of this offseason.
Right,
Premium 2.0.
In all
is
honesty, it
finally
looks
coming.
like it's been made in 2005
Because it was.
right now.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it will soon look like it was made in 2018.
And have more fancy, shiny things on it.
Yes. And with the 0 to 100 grades and all of the cool stuff, you get game-by-game stuff, you get career stuff. It goes all the way back to 2006, plus a few Easter egg Super Bowls if you guys look hard enough. So go ahead and check it out. Stay with us all during free agency week. Sam and I are going to be commenting on every single pick over at profootballfocus.com. And we'll have another podcast for you early next week. Everybody, have a good one.